I'm going to be talking to Colin Armstrong, who's the CEO of Vancouver-based HTEC, about a new project at the Port of Vancouver that involves hydrogen fueling for trucks that work in the port. So welcome to the interview, Colin.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Good to be here, Mark.
This is a really interesting project because one of the things that permeates my hydrogen interviews is the critics say it's expensive, it's not going to work, the physics don't work, on and on and on. And those who are actually doing it, who are experimenting, say, no, hang on a second, the economics can work. We're testing to see just what they are, see what some of the problems are that we need to come up with solutions for. And this seems to me to be exactly that kind of a test, like a pilot project.
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, I think we tend to look at it as an adoption support project more than a pilot project. So, fuel cells are well proven. There's like millions of miles on them. They're used every day. So it's now more moving it into the user's world, essentially, and understanding their user requirements, whether it's a particular environment or use case. So I look at it more of as adoption support. So we're educating the fleet operators, we're getting them to understand the various nuances. And I mean, ultimately, there shouldn't be much change in their use case and how they use it, but that process has to be learned through on both sides. So we think about it that way versus a pilot project.
Yeah, fair enough. This project there'll be 4 fuel cell electric yard trucks involved, as well as 2 Class 8 drayage trucks. So think for viewers, you can think of a semi truck that's moving goods around the yard. What role will HTEC play in this project?
So we were the sort of the genesis of it. So we went out and talked to the various operators. So we're doing still a lot of management of the various stakeholders, from users to government. There's a lot of data collection, there's communications. But that's sort of our side business. We have sourced the vehicles, so we're doing the interface between the supplier and the user on the vehicles. And our main business is providing the fuel. So we're developing the fueling station. It's at a Parkland/Chevron fueling site. It's on Tsawwassen First Nations. So which is out in the Delta Port area, close to the BC Ferries, Tsawwassen. So so really our main business is providing the fuel to the vehicles.
Is this a hydrogen on demand kind of fueling station?
Yeah, I guess that's a way to think about it. I hadn't heard about that term, but I mean, it's the same as any gasoline or card lock station. The drivers show up and connect the nozzle, put in their credit cards, and fill up the fuel.
I guess what I was getting at is, will the hydrogen be produced offsite and piped over to the fueling station, or will you have like an electrolyzer on site that makes the hydrogen right there?
Yeah, so good point. No, it's we call it central production. So it's at a facility. It gets compressed and then it gets moved to the fueling station, and gas unloaded at the fueling station as needed.
Tell me a little bit about moving hydrogen around, because this seems to be a point of contention. It has to be chilled. There are issues around design of the pipes and so on to make sure it doesn't leak, because hydrogen's a very small, light molecule. How much of a challenge is that for you?
Well, just to put it in perspective for your readers, hydrogen is used massive basis globally. The bulk of it is at lowest pressure, 300-400 psi in refineries or ammonia making. So that's all in pipes, and they do that. Thousands and thousands of kilometers of piping is used. Excuse me, what you're talking about is when we move it from one place to our fueling station or the central production, it's either compressed, highly compressed gas, or it is a cryogenic liquid, which is and those industries to themselves are huge. I mean, every glass manufacturing, chip manufacturing, power plant, hydrogenation facility has gaseous or liquid hydrogen delivered to it. So it's a multi-billion-dollar a year business in North America and globally. So big track records. Forklifts are now, Walmart and Costco use hundreds of forklifts 24/7. They've got 15 million fills. So the safety aspect of it. Now, what the issue is the cost. So it's when you talk about fuel, it's more expensive to move hydrogen than it is to move gasoline and diesels. And so liquid, or sorry, on the gaseous side, you don't want to move more than 100 kilometers really, otherwise your cost just goes up. Liquid is probably delivered 500 to 1,000 kilometers on average. I think as you get into fuel, my guess is the 500 kilometer mark would be the radius that you would want to move liquid hydrogen. So that gives us something to work with, and the more you use those assets, the more the cost comes down. They're both increasing in pressure and size, so that the amount you can deliver it is certainly being looked at. So it's definitely is costly. Costs are coming down based on technology and utilization.
Can you give us an idea of what it costs to make a kilogram of hydrogen, and then the cost at the pump? I've heard the figure of $6 a kilogram seems to be standard.
Yeah, well, from electrolysis, it's very dependent on the electricity price. But in British Columbia, yeah, you're in the $6 to $7 range once you get decent utilization in there. There's a number of different tax incentives to reduce your capital cost, right? From an energy cost, you're about $4, $4 to $5. And then the rest is capital and operating cost at the center. Then distribution costs anywhere from $1 to $2 on the liquid side to $6 to $10 or more on the gaseous side, based on your volumes and distances. So yeah, so then you want to decide what you sell it at the pump for. At the end of the day, we've tried to keep it the same as gasoline and diesel on a distance basis. So $12 to $15 is the current pricing for 100 kilometers of travel in a car, and that's what we sell it at.
Oh, that's interesting. So basically, the economics are competitive between your hydrogen trucks and the diesel trucks they'd be replacing?
Yeah, I mean, that's what we're working on. There's a lot of elements to make that happen in an early market, right? So if you buy a truck, they're going to wrap in that initial setup, training, service factors. So, if you buy 1,000 trucks, it gets spread, but nobody's buying 1,000 trucks. So unfortunately, that investment gets wrapped over those first 5, 10, 15 trucks. And in our case, it's, 6 trucks is fair amount of effort has to go into there that tends to get laid into the cost. Ultimately, there's an awful lot of work to drive that TCO into the right direction. It's not there right now. Again, incentives and policies, they affect the cost of hydrogen, or sorry, gasoline and diesel, and they affect the cost or the selling price of hydrogen as well. So it's a complex mix, but it's economically, when you look at it, it's going to be more expensive to move it, but at the end of the day, you also use it twice as efficiently, so you don't need to move as much fuel. So it's still being figured out, but indications are there's a lot of opportunity to compete. And then, of course, you're managing your carbon, so gives you, depending on the value of managing that carbon, affects the price of the use case. So.
Now, well, we should point out that the BC government is kicking in $4 million into this project, and the current price of the carbon tax is $65 a ton, rising to $170 by 2030. Does that increase of $105 a ton in the next 6-7 years, does that change the economics of your project significantly?
Yeah, we're trying to predict going back to that, what is the cost to travel 100 kilometers, and we want to be able to match that. So the amount we can charge will go up, basically, right? So, and yeah, I think at $170, it's 35 cents a liter, roughly, the tax, somewhere around that order of magnitude. So therefore, we can charge more on our, we charge per kilogram. Kilograms about the same energy as 4 liters of gasoline, right? So So absolutely, I mean, that's a driver that allows us to hopefully, in some point in time, be as cost effective or even lower than diesels and gasoline.
Looking ahead over the next couple of years, say the next 2 or 5 years, Colin, how do you expect this project to roll out? What are some of the things that you need to learn? And what happens after this project is over? If it's successful, are we going to see a greater adoption of these vehicles at ports and airports and so on?
Yeah, so I mean, it's pretty marketing 101. We're hoping that word of mouth from these operators, the Tidewaters and the BC ferries, will say, "Hey, this all worked great. There's benefits. Yeah, there's perhaps a couple challenges, but we understand them now." We hope that supply of vehicles will be more forthcoming. We don't have to help the operators. They can choose internally, as a pathway to meet their goals, to use hydrogen, and understand the pros and cons of doing that, and how you actually do it. They would come back to us and perhaps say, well, can you increase the capacity of the fueling station because we want to fill X number of vehicles? So it is an iterative, but ideally it's just word of mouth marketing, and there is that whole supply of trucks that's coming. There's so many different people working on the various components, the trucks themselves, from the likes of Peterbilt and Kenworth. They just announced a JV with Toyota. Toyota is making thousands of fuel cells for cars, so it's bringing the cost down for the truck. So there's a lot of moving parts, but it's all, I'd say, a groundswell in the right direction. So we're pretty excited about it. We're trying to figure out how we ramp up our capacity to build the infrastructure and the capacity of the infrastructure to meet, because vehicles, once they're available, they can make demand very, very quickly, and we have to balance that approach. So we're pretty optimistic, obviously, and these kind of things, again, it goes back to adoption support, right? They're happy with it. They've solved their problem. And their problem is to have good transportation without emissions, and so the other people will do other parts of the puzzle.
Good stuff. Well, Colin, good luck with your project. Thank you very much for this.
Excellent. Thank you very much for the opportunity to explain it, and looking forward to the project ourselves.